today about traumatizing animals. Are we traumatizing animals by domesticating them? And maybe animals can only be cured by bird remedies regarding that trauma layer. And we very rarely think about this because amongst not so educated homeopaths as we have in India, people don't know about the bird remedies really. So we want to talk about bird remedies, about animals, about encaging, and maybe we make a leap to our engagement during the corona restrictions. Yes, and I want to say that this is the start for the Homeopathy Summit, which we will have in October. We will have 4 live talks previous to that. And this is the startup, the real beginner, and one of my favorites. So would you like to introduce yourself a bit for our community? Neil, do you want to start?
I can start. So I'm Neil Dougan. I'm based in Perth in Western Australia. I'm originally from New Zealand, and I moved here after living in London for several years. So I've lived in a number of countries, and it's certainly very interesting to experience the different ways in which humans interact with their, with animals. And we always think about I am the owner of the horse or the cat or the dog, and for the longest time now, I've been trying to work out who owns who, and does anybody own anybody? And so in this conversation, like this topic that we're looking at here, I find it really intriguing, the interaction between a human and an animal, and quite what that means. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Bettina?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody who is taking part of our conversation. I have spent all my life with animals in my childhood, and later on there have been pigs, sheep, horses, dogs. So I had the chance to watch animals a lot. And my second profession besides the horses is homeopathy for animals. And I'm very interested to learn a lot about bird remedies today.
Wonderful. I just love, your passion for animals comes through Neil and Bettina. It's just amazing to hear that. And I'm Dr. Priya Subramanian, and I've been practicing I'm a baby actually compared to the both of you in homeopathy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Should I speak a little louder?
Yeah. I cannot understand very good.
I'm so sorry. I will speak a little louder. So as I said, I'm a baby compared to the both of you, and in terms of experience and in terms of the depth of, the thought process that you're at currently. What Neil said was something very interesting about he's still trying to understand, who owns who. And we are so used to thinking of animals as our possessions, maybe our children. We tend to morphize them, and we tend to give them attributes. We tend to look for love in them. We tend to look for validation in animals, in their interactions with us. And in reciprocation, I don't think we are giving them as much as we expect from them as human beings. So I think I will find this conversation going forward very interesting, and to try and understand whether domestication has taken away more from the animal than has given to them, the so-called freedom of being domesticated by us. No, but they get, home to live in, and they get security, and they get love, they get food from us. These are the things that we tell ourselves, I guess, when we think about our relationship with our animals, whether they be pet or whether they be outside the house. So, and I have used homeopathy in a few rescue birds. I've had a long conversation with Marianne about this. And in India, sometimes, the wild birds, they still get caught in the kite strings.
Mhm.
And these kite strings during the harvest festival that happens in January, so these kites are flown as a symbol of that the harvest is ready and it's been cut and there's plenty. So we have a harvest festival in the mid of Jan. And often these kite strings, previously they used to be plain cotton strings. Now you have nylon kite strings, or sometimes you have kite strings that are made stronger by rubbing them with glass and other things to improve their to make them unbreakable. So oftentimes these high flying birds get caught in those kite strings, and they fall and their wings are hurt, and the air sacs under the wings are hurt. And so I've had a wonderful opportunity actually to help a couple of these birds, and have occasion to use homeopathy for a couple of patients, children, animals, their animal children. So, as I said, my experience in this field is in its infancy, and I hope to learn much more. And I hope I can contribute something useful.
Yes, of course. We are very much looking forward to your experience and to your knowledge. Neil might have an internet problem, which sometimes happens in Australia on Sundays. I hope he will
Yes.
be back soon.
Excuse me.
What I want to add in is my experience with the Greek cats.
Hmm.
German cats and Austrian cats have a long-term ancestor line of animals that are used to live in a house, which are used to have owners. They are not so much used to be on the streets. Whereas here in Greece, cats are usually on the streets. Rarely is that a cat has an owner.
Hmm.
And in Germany and Austria, when you meet a cat, they are not so shy to humans. When they are coming into a house, even if they are 2, 3, or 4 months old, they will get adjusted to humans and they will easily adapt. Whereas when you find a cat here in Greece, the cat will look at you as a stranger in his environment. And it was a very interesting experience for me that the cats decided to come to have something to eat, but they didn't want to be domesticated or have too much to do with me. Till one day when you could see it in their eyes, they really decided that they want to live with me. They wanted to be the tamed cat. And so they came into the house, they used the cat door, and I remember Moses sitting in front of me and doing the singing of a male cat for about 10 to 15 minutes. And it was hard for me to understand, but somehow I did get it that he wants to retire and that he wants to live with me now. So I took a blanket and gave him a seat near my bed. He went on the blanket, and since then he lived in the house. But it was a decision from him, it was not my decision. I didn't pick him as an owner. He did pick me to be a caretaker. And I think this is a very big difference.
May I say something?
Yes, of course, we are talking.
Okay. I think this owner business, that is very, very human. We also own land, which I also question. And I believe that the evolution has somehow integrated the domestication. I believe the animals who are domesticated, they do have it a bit in them, but they are still the animals they have been.
Mm.
And some animals really decide to live with us, and they make their own kingdom where they live if they can. And there I have to tell a story with a pig. We picked up a very little baby pig and we brought her up in the house. And then when she grown older, she came with us on the farm. And the farm had no fences, it was all open. She got accustomed to the horses and a little bit to the chickens and made her territorium bigger and bigger. She got around in the village and people had a lot of fun with our little pig. And she grew up and up. And then was winter, and I realized spring is coming. The people work in their gardens, and they don't want that our pig digs their gardens around. So I said, Clara, the time of freedom, as we live it, is over. You have to go now behind the fence. And we have a very, very big garden where the chickens live. And I said, that's now your paradise. And she also had a little stable there. And I myself didn't believe that she would accept that. I expected that she would cry and make noises and say, let me out, let me out. And she lay down, relaxed so deeply, I couldn't believe it. And after a while, I closed the gate and said, that's now your kingdom. She said, yes, I know, and that's great. She accepted it from that day on. At night, she came into the barn. In the morning, she went out into her paradise. Later on, she had then also a boyfriend pig, and it was no thing. It was also kind of her decision that she now had in our farm her kingdom, and she was happy.
But I think this is a big, big difference when you talk with animals.
And you talk with them.
When you talk with them, when you explain to them.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be just act on them.
Yeah.
Without explaining.
Yeah, yeah.
And this makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I was my computer, the whole thing collapsed, so I have to be on the phone now. But I apologise for dropping out there, and I'm not sure what you've covered. But in my work over the years, every time that I've worked with an animal, so like I mainly work with humans, but I sometimes work with animals. And every time I'm working with an animal, I always am working with the human that is around the animal at the same time. So like it's inevitable that there is that connection going on. And up until very recently, I would always feel, awful in my heart about the fact that these animals had been contaminated by the humans. So up until very recently, I always felt that way. And so the illnesses of the animals were taken on from the complexities of the humans, one after the other. And, we're talking about, well, there'd be at least 1,000 animals that I've worked with in that sort of category, and as I say, like, I'm not really an expert on working with animals, but there would be at least 1,000. And very, very recently, what I've recognized is the way in which the animals become enriched by the communication and the connection to the humans. So there are unexpected ways in which they become enriched. And it really amounts to the increase in the ability of perception for the animals. And so the fact that they're losing the so-called, what Bettina is talking about, it's the so-called freedom of being a wild animal, and now they're becoming a domesticated animal. It's really more of a trade. It's that they're foregoing some aspects of themselves to grow and to gain by the association with the humans. And this is an unexpected to me. Up until recently, I would not have really observed that. And as I say before, I would look at the animals and I'd think, oh no, how could we do this to this dog? How could we do this to this horse or this cat or, other kinds of domesticated animals? And, they've lost it. They're just so far removed. And I would have conversations with Marianne over the years, and I would say, what can we do? How do we allow, you know, all of the cats to be wild again? And then we talk about it, and you realize that this is not possible, because a domesticated cat, is not like a cat from original times. They're not. It's a totally different animal, and so it's almost as though it's all gone too far for it to be able to go backwards. So I'm not sure if I've come in and just restated things that you've been talking about before, but this was, you know, my observation. So the change for me was recognizing the ways in which the animals become incredibly enriched by this connection to the humans. And the main way that I mean that they become enriched is that they get to borrow the perception of the humans. And in doing that, of course, it's a two-edged sword. On the one side, it's wonderful because they get all this new information, but on the other side, they then are perceiving all of the crazy stuff, all the psychiatric stuff that's happening for the humans. So they get some of both, you know, both sides of it. And you know, the journey forward, in my opinion, is the journey to actually assist both the human and the animal to actually manage the psychiatric components of the interrelationship. So it's not good enough for us to only give to the animal an increased perception, but at the same time to dump all of our psychiatric issues upon them. You know, what we must do is actually make a change here. I'll stop talking because otherwise I'll keep talking forever.
I would add that it's not only that they enrich in themselves, I think they also are very, very extremely prepared to help us humans. Also by showing these psychic disasters which they see in humans, I find very strongly that they are also here with us to help. And therefore I find it really extremely necessary and obsolete that we recognize them still as the animals as they are, and that we respect their lives. And in horses, I very often, also in my treatments, I very often had to deal with horses who have been pulled out of their society every so often, or maybe only once. Maybe they were in a group of horses, they had a very strong friend, then the new owner comes, puts him in the trailer and drives away, and the friend is gone. And if it's only happened once, it can still mean that that horse will show up heavy illnesses with the cause of having lost this one friend.
Mm.
And always when we take them out of their herd, we should realize and be very careful. Are they psychically prepared to go on a walk or whatever with us? Or should we stay around or within the group? Because that means more than anything else to a horse is the herd. That's the security, that's the confidence, that's everything. And there we people, we are as ignorant as we can be. Very often,
Absolutely.
sadly.
I agree. I think what I'm seeing from what I can understand from what you're saying, Bettina and Neil, is that at least the relationship between the animal and the human, where you live in your society or in your circles, is somewhere a little further ahead in terms of realization and in terms of much more about the spiritual aspect of the relationship. What I'm seeing currently in India, where I'm living in Mumbai, is that we are still several steps behind, not one or two steps behind. We are still bringing in dogs like Samoyeds and Huskies to Mumbai because it's nice, it's different, but they are not acclimatized. They don't get, because they are not meant to be in these climates. We have not asked them. We have just brought them there. There are breeders who use really unscrupulous methods to, to make this possible. So there's that whole cycle of, still trying to acquire something, a breed that isn't suitable, is still, for their purposes, it's still going on. The other thing that I'm seeing happening here is, um, you, when a pug walks past you in the morning, I can hear a lot of breathing issues happening to the pug. So I don't know whether pugs are even meant again for India. So that's another breed that I find. I know that a lot of Saint Bernards are in India, in Mumbai. Can you imagine? From from the Swiss climate that they're supposed to be, they're here. And the other thing that, where you were talking about enrichment, and that, they take a lot from where we are. So then obviously the animals here are still a couple of steps behind, because they would really not be able to take anything from the families that they're in, because I don't think that they're talking about herds and with habits like that. Dogs, because they're again given food which probably is unsuitable. They're not given, they're overfed, under exercised, they're not, um, they don't go out for regular walks. There is a concept of a dog walker, which is a really funny concept, because this is this is somebody who has absolutely no equation or interaction or connection with the animal, who's supposed to be taking the animal, the family member, out on a walk, and he's just lost, with doing something else, and he's standing in the side of the road, probably having a chai, and the animal is sitting, next to him, really bored, and there is nothing that that animal is getting in that interaction. And as a consequence, when I'd gone with a friend who was having her dog put to sleep, and she really struggled quite a long time with that decision. I saw that the 4 or 5 dogs that were there, that came to the vet on that day for their regular checkups, were all really very obese, and they were waddling, they had hip issues, they had, and their parents, their family members, the humans, were also obese. So we are eating wrong, we are not exercising, we are sitting around, the family member is being walked by somebody else who doesn't know what a dog walk means. They're not talking to them, they're not interacting with them, and we're overfeeding them, and we're just trying to get them, clothes. And like I said, the relationship is, we're trying to bring them into a human sort of relationship, but they're not. They're, you know and then the other thing, the really sad thing that has happened during this time, is a lot of people losing jobs, who probably, got a puppy in December last year. Suddenly they have lost jobs. So there are a lot of good puppies who are 8, 9 months old, 10 months old, 12 months old, 11 months old, up for adoption. They don't have homes because their human families have, both of them have lost their jobs. They've moved, probably because Mumbai is an expensive city to live in. They've left the family member behind. And 2 dogs came up for adoption. This white Labrador suddenly developed hip issues. They didn't know why. She was literally limping, and she'd been abandoned by her human owners. And they sent me photographs, and they said, what can we do about her? I said, she has to be with her family. They have not told her, they've not had that conversation with her. They've just left her and gone in somebody else's house. And they already had a couple of male dogs, and this is a new female. And obviously it's going to be a really tough beginning for her. And they didn't know what to do. So we, the dog is lost, the human is also lost. The herd has not been made, and the relationship is still at a very stage where we are making the decisions. We are not making the decisions with them, we're making it for them. So it's much more of a higher lower kind of relationship that's going on. So and cats also, cats have the advantage of being able to leave and come back still. The dogs stay in apartments in India, so, and somebody else is walking them downstairs, and really bored doing it. He's paid to just walk him around, so then he goes out of sight, and he's talking on the mobile with someone, and the dog is just, so sad and waiting there. So it's sad actually. So we're 7 or 8 steps behind in our relationship. We're nowhere near. There might be the odd pair bonding happening between the human and the animal, but by and large, this is the kind of patterns that I'm seeing here currently.
So it's better than in Greece, but still not what an animal would desire.
No, nowhere near. Nowhere near.
So I think the really important piece in there is this notion of the choice of the animal, and there being an opportunity for the animal to make a choice. And for that, for me, for that to be meaningful, there has to be a context provided to the animal, and it's very, very tricky. So like when I do animal communication with a wild animal, I couldn't have a conversation with it around what it would mean for it to come and live with me at my house. I can't have that conversation because the wild animal has no context for what that would mean.
Wouldn't understand it.
It wouldn't understand this conversation at all. So at the moment, I'm writing a new book relating to the spiritual opportunities for animals with humans. So like the sort of collaborative opportunities. And I'm very interested to actually get a snake as part of the team to work with the snake. But I can't,
Wow.
at the moment, I can't actually get a snake interested in the project because so far in my conversations with them, they have no context for what I'm trying to talk about. There is no context at all. So when you're talking, Priya, about the, these dogs who are living in an apartment and they've been probably taken as puppies much too young away from their mothers and their siblings, and they're taken into an apartment, so they're on the 10th floor of the apartment building, and some stranger comes and collects them to take them out for a walk and doesn't really take them for a walk, doesn't interact with them, doesn't communicate with them in any way. Well, there's little or no context for those dogs around a conversation about cooperating and collaborating with the family.
No.
So, what Bettina was talking about, how the animals are so prepared to serve and to share and amongst their family. So they're prepared to actually contribute and do so much work. In the case that you're talking about, these cases, there's little or no context for the animal to even know how that might be possible. So it's not the and it's not the rosy, like in Australia, we have everything from the same situation that you're talking about in Mumbai to people who are very conscious. So there's a big range. So I don't want you to think that that you're so far behind, because it's not true. There's many people behaving in the same way towards animals. And of course, this is a very big farming country. And you look at the way that the factory farming is done, and it's another whole level of problem. It's I'm not sure that it's any worse than being in the apartment building and having those situations, but it's certainly not a good setting.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a problem that we are not really connected to the animals. Would we be connected from heart to heart instead of having the idea of owning something? The whole situation would be different, and the whole interaction would be different.
Maybe we could work here a little bit on the awareness of people, what animals are aware of. I have one example. I had 2 horses, and to the one horse I wanted to give a homeopathic remedy in a D potent, and to the other horse I wanted to give the remedy in a C very high, C M or higher. And I confused the hands. I had in one hand the D potents and in the other hand the C potents. And I wanted to give the D potents to the horse who should become the C potents. I only approached with my hand, and he blurred in the air and said, "No, no, no, what are you doing?" And then I realized I mixed, and I made the same movement, said, "Here, you got your seatbelt." And yes, that's what I need. That really happened.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people are not aware of the awareness of animals.
Mm.
Mm.
And the struggle also for their life. We had further on also pigs, and in winter they had a box bigger than a normal normal horse box, which isn't normal at all. And they kept this absolutely clean. And there was one corner that was the toilet, and there was a corner that was the sleeping room, and then there was the place where one was eating. Like we keep our flats clean, they kept our not too big, but also not too small box clean our winter. In summer, they were outside. So
Pigs are famous for that, to be
yeah,
absolutely.
but I found it
If you
astonishing
give
how
them a
little
chance.
room they needed to make it possible.
Mhm.
And I think for pigs it must be horrifying that they have to live on their manure the whole time.
What we are doing to encage pigs is beyond tragedy.
Mm.
It's it's beyond disgusting in any way. And what I think is that there is something in between. You know, horses, Bettina, as you deal with them, they have a lot of freedom. But when I think of the horses I treated way back then, they were encaged in a stable 23 hours a day, maybe 1 hour on the paddock. And if they had luck, an owner that wasn't really able to ride came by and ruined their back. And obviously, all those horses had some kind of illness sooner or later. And in my homeopathic experience, sometimes it was really hard to cure. And when I talked with Priya the first time about the bird remedies, I opened my eyes and I thought, wow, those encaged animals might need bird remedies to cure that layer of engagement and that trauma of engagement. And Priya, I would like you to just state a few points on how bird remedies work and what is the essence on the whole.
Sure, sure. I remember that conversation, and we started talking about, something, and then we went a little astray. But then we had what in the end, what happened was, the end result of that was it opened my eyes too. So we were speaking about, this whole situation about how being forced to be home, not being allowed to go out as they wanted, the human condition. Actually, we came through the human condition to the animal condition, I remember. So it's ironic really about what we're talking, and that former conversation about how people that needed the bird remedy probably previously used to travel a lot for their work, a lot of transatlantic journeys, or traveling from India across into Europe several times a month, and really enjoying that kind of work, that the freedom that kind of work allowed them, going across borders, and not being tied down to their home responsibilities, which otherwise they would be. Like we know that in bird remedies, this is the other theme, that having these strong ties and bindings which keep them, the responsibilities that they take on the shoulder, literally leading to stiffness, and this whole girdle being the weight of the world on the shoulders. And this kind of tubercular element that we spoke about, being in a confined space and not being able to move, not being able to breathe, not being able to speak their truth, desire to, break away from all these relationships and ties that bind them, the responsibilities that bind them down. And also we spoke about what else did we talk about that time?
We talked
Sorry, could you
even
repeat your
about
question? I think I went.
talked even about the fate of women who are confined to the
Yes,
house in the Arabic world.
yes. Yes. When we spoke about the, the Buteo jamaicensis and the Falco peregrinus disciplinatus, we spoke about those two. And you were asking me whether in Arabia, which has the, the theme, the Arabian horses, these horses are broken, and they're, they are wild horses actually that are brought, and they're, forced to be in a particular way. They're bred, the bloodline, the selective breeding happens. So this is again not something that they have a choice over. And how, the falconry as a, is part of their culture. It carries on from father to son to, grandfather to father to son. And how, I saw something, a program about them having this guided flight for the falcon, and taking him to the top of the tower, and then, forcing him to fly in a particular way and coming. And how this whole culture is about making that bird you call the bird, you train the bird to come and land on the arm. And what would be the effect of, all of that on the psyche of the bird itself. And we also spoke about, the kind of conditions that bird remedies, women who might need bird remedies, that may have, eye conditions like glaucoma. We spoke about hypertension, because the stress that is there within you, when you're forced and restricted and constricted and forced to be there. We also spoke about, I think we mm, the how traditional roles for women were, and how a lot of women these days are trying to break free from these traditional roles, and writing their own roles, that where they want equal footing in family responsibilities with their male counterparts, and they also want to retain their identity. We spoke about, how the identity completely changes in the Indian context, when, before marriage, you have your father's name as a last name. And after you get married, you have your husband's entire family name as your last name. And how for somebody who might need a bird remedy, even this particular concept or idea might be too much, might be too much of a weight for them to take. And we also touched upon the spiritual aspect of, because these bird remedies have a, kind of an overview, a world view, and their eye is always on the horizon. So for them the current scenario might be too much, because they're already, looking at something that's coming much ahead in the future, because of the wide scope of vision that they have. They can understand already things that we probably currently might not understand, being as we are in that situation. We spoke about those things also, the foresight that we say, the breadth of vision, and how it connects to, eye complaints like glaucoma. And also we spoke about, the psychiatric conditions like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic disorder that bird remedies might be used for. And I think we spoke about certain situations where, the child, daughter, her place in the family, when she gets married, her place in the other family, how these responsibilities are given to her, and she has to take it on, these roles that she has to take on, how sublimation of your own, what you desire, what your choice, is pushed down, and what others need, you're doing for them, but with a lot of I would not say resentment, but with a lot of pressure inside. So it can come out as bursts of anger. It can come out as a deep depression, a sadness, because you're not allowed to speak your truth, and not allowed to live your life the way that you want to instinctively do. And the relationship with remedies like Kali nitricum, tuberculinum aviar, Also, the Homeopathy group of remedies, where again they have the same themes. Along with the plant sensitivity, you will see this closed in, hemmed in, being inside, and this weight, which you'll see in remedies like quercus, which is the oak, and where there you'll see sensitivity and taking on familial responsibilities. Here you will see much more of a somebody doing something to someone, a kind of a higher and lower relationship in an animal remedy. And like in a tuberculinum AVR, you will see just probably lung symptoms and this kind of pressure and this kind of restriction coming throughout the case as a kind of just the sense of restriction and not being allowed to travel. So these were the group of remedies that come close in constellation, and also the situations where bird remedies might be needed. And Kali nitricum is purely about maybe indicated in a high blood pressure, where with the fear of narrow spaces and the role, the place in the family, and being in this particular situation, which is where you're caught in a narrow place with no scope to breathe, and you just want to break free and come out, and it's do or die. It's a kind of like a life and death situation. So again, that is where Kali nitricum would come. And also we spoke about one more remedy, which is this gunpowder, which I had used in treating the couple of Indian kites who were injured. And after aconite for the shock, when I found the bird and it was just not moving, and after a few doses of aconite 1 m, gunpowder was the remedy that I found, which has this nitricum and this I think in it, and it has a little bit of sulfur also in it. So it helped heal the wings, and we set free two of these Indian kites that we had found. And these are 2-3 of the remedies that I normally keep: aconite, uh, for immediately; arnica if there is any injury, any swelling; hypericum if there is any nerve involvement; and gunpowder in low we give, so that the bird can quickly overcome and get the desire to fly. Gunpowder has to do with that explosive speed which the high flying birds have. So we spoke about all of this, and it was a very interesting, illuminating conversation for me. And Marianne, you were already thinking 10 steps ahead, and you say your eye open, but then you had put all the dots together. You had followed it very well.
Yes, and in this talk, I realized how similar the expression in cats, in dogs, in horses is once they are encaged, to a human which is encaged during the corona restrictions, or an Arabian female who is encaged in the house and in tradition. And I even remembered an ex-friend of mine who was encaged by morbus Bechterew as a disease. And he finally died from pancreatic cancer. And I never had the possibility to give him kalium nitricum because he refused homeopathic treatment.
Priya, that's a marvelous description that you gave there. And the thing that kept coming through to me as you were speaking about those different cases was the psychiatric issues that are occurring for the human who is actually encaging the animal in the first place. So, the case of breaking horses in that have been running wild in the country, for example, or the need to break the falcon and to perform these acts and so on. And what I realized as you were talking about it is that in, say, for example, the Australian culture, we have broken the humans. So obviously there was the traditional breaking of the indigenous people who lived here in Australia.
Yes.
When the white people came to this country, it was absolutely horrific, and there was no decision given to the indigenous people, and no freedom for any kind of choice at all. And everything was about breaking them, just like a horse. And if we look at the, the cultural conditions that exist here in Australia now, we have all of the fallout of what you're talking about, in terms of these remedies, that you're looking at. And I just wonder for the large cultural component, because white people are encaged as well. Like, it's not just the indigenous people that are encaged in this country. So the white people who live here, for example, a good example would be with the corona lockdowns. They all just go along with it. They do what they're told. So these are people who once upon a time were courageous and able to stand up for their own freedom and these things. But today they're like the chickens in the commercial farm.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in their boxes and they're totally encaged. There's no freedom. There's no willingness to try and exert freedom. And I don't know where this conversation is going from my end, but I'm just really intrigued by what you're observing there. It opens up many questions for me, many questions.
It's
And
really
Neil, see what
interesting.
you're talking. You say they are like chickens in the box. And maybe
Mm.
Priya can tell you a bit about chicken as a homeopathic remedy.
Yeah.
Yes, because it just reminded me about our second conversation, Marianne, when we spoke about the Galliforme and how this industrial farming, we generally we know about dogs and probably horses as being, dogs for being accepting the things that are done to them, and horses being the saddest creatures because they have been part of human activities that they have no interest in, like wars, and being on the war field with all that noise and being forced to run at a particular pace that they don't like for very long durations and time, and with all that noise and all that bloodshed, and they generally want to just be by themselves in their herd, run when they want, stop when they want. And probably I was just around that time I attended Jonathan Hardy's webinar on birds, and he spoke about the fact that we don't realize that industrial farming has made the domestic chicken the most depressed, really desolate creature. They just, their backs are broken, their legs are broken, their beaks are removed, they're forced into these small boxes, and they live and die there, and they're transported in small cages, and they sometimes they die on the way, and yet they're sold as still processed and sold. And their eggs, for eggs we exploit them. They don't really lay so many eggs, but industrial farming has made them like something like machines, and they live and die in darkness perhaps, and with given food that will make them, which is not what they like. So they're basically eating and just doing basic biological functions, and then living that short life before they can be processed. And when tender meat is needed, probably even the chicks are lead a shorter life. And the farm cycle itself, it has credit lines, poverty, bankruptcy, a lot of sadness, a lot of exploitation, because you get immigrant workers to, they're given these huge areas that they buy because they want to send money back home. So they're also stuck there. They're not able to go. One season where, there is some sort of flu or some sort of, death, then you have to cull the entire, that group of chickens, so they don't get ready for the factory. And so then the immigrant workers are also caught in this cycle of not being able to go home, stuck there. He has a loan. This bankruptcy cycle continues, and sadness and separation from families. And so the energy, as you say, that we don't realize how close these energies are, and we are picking up on their sadness and they're picking up on our lives probably. And when you speak about what's happening to the Aborigines in Australia, and how their entire the food, the way that they eat has all completely changed. They were not given the choice. How diabetes and obesity is on the rise. Also in the US, where diabetes and obesity and factory industrial farming is on the rise, and how we are taught that Thanksgiving my sons are very enamored by this idea of Thanksgiving as a huge festival where turkey is consumed, and lots of things happen and families get together. But we don't realize that this is actually the celebration of a particular event where a white man came from across the sea, and you know subjugated these beautiful, fierce, independent, free warriors, the Native American Indians who lived there, who were not given a choice again of
Mm.
moving. They just supposedly freely handed over their lands and their titles to the white man. So no choice again. So this is a similar cycle that we're seeing. So Jonathan Hardy said that the galliformy, um, the chicken is probably the most desolate, depressed of all the birds possible. you know there's no hope, there's no life, you're doing the same thing, repetitive things every day.
And what is in the chicken remedy?
Ovi galline, if I'm not, no, that is the inner membrane of the egg. I will tell you. uh, Galliformis, it's from the Galliformis. Chicken belong to the Galliformis family.
No, I don't mean but what is the essential of the chicken as remedy?
Essence, the essence is doing the same repetitive mindless things again and again and again.
Okay.
He presented the case of a supermarket checkout person, just
As,
scanning items throughout the day, working there, the same
yeah.
job where you're not using your mind, and just working at a very spinal level. There's no creativity, there's no freedom, you don't get time for yourself. Your choice is not asked, your freedom is not asked. You're not asked whether you want to
Okay.
do this.
So
This
you
is
say
what was
chicken
the
remedy
essence.
would be for all these cases of chicken and people, and then yeah, now I understand.
Yes, yes,
These
yes, yes.
horses, I have a question. When I go through a stable where there are these unboxed, abused horses, my impression has been always been like that. There's nobody home, as if they were
Hmm.
not in their bodies. And I had a little bit the hope that they really can get out of their body and not have to suffer this life so strongly. Does, can you make a connection with this information?
Yes, 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 yes. Because when the situation is so traumatic that you're not able to experience it living in that body, you probably escape your body like, you would, like a human would, in a situation where there is so much pain and abuse. You just have, take yourself away to another place where, you're not feeling these things anymore. So it makes a lot of sense to say that when you approach that stall or that box, you have a feeling that there's nobody home, because the spirit of the animal has actually fled in order for the body to be able to endure these really I would say extreme circumstances. uh, so I would think of bird remedies there also. I would think of probably the buteo, the falco, the high flying birds, because I would, if you find that this horse was particularly very sensitive and, took on a lot and gave much more than was asked of
Yeah.
the animal, then I would probably think of carcinosin as a remedy, so much the desire to please and to be in the good graces of that owner, or the desire to show the usefulness so much is there, that the horse puts its safety on the back foot and does perilous things to, like a steeplechase is not something, or a dressage is what we spoke about. Even Maria and I remember dressage is something that I find monstrous to do, to a horse. Keep the angle of the foot in a particular way. I would see carcinosin as, because creativity is also there in that, they are given marks for creativity, how beautiful the arch of the back is, or how, elegant the forelock is or something. So I would say carcinosin as a remedy there also, because
Did I
The animal
understand
gives the gifts.
carcinosinum or what?
Carcinosinum.
Carcinosinum.
Yeah,
You
okay.
will see it in the eyes, Bettina. Look at the eyes, at this sclera. You will see it in the eyes when it is carcinosinum.
Yeah.
When you have
Will
this
be a
impression
bit
that
more
nobody
blue
home.
than usual.
And I would also say somewhere sulfur as a remedy also. Sulfur, selenium, palladium. Palladium when, you know, it's a show horse and has fallen from grace and, you know, and is, you know, very, you know, was doing very creative work and has suddenly fallen from grace. Sulfur for the anger and the resentment that the horse feels, that you know, you're casting, keeping that animal aside and is of no use anymore. It has become redundant. Oxygen for just simply oxygen as a remedy also, because oxygen is about, or oxygen will shows a lot of animal characteristics also, right, as a remedy, because this is about the first breath. This is also about you know, being born. So if you uh, use that animal so much that it is almost you know, shunned or cast away, so I would say oxygen also as a remedy, oxygenate as a remedy would also be something that you could think of if a lot of abuse was done to the animal. So you could think of that also. So again, you can see those remedies are very complementary to the bird remedies as well. So if you'll see that there's a lot of aggressiveness still in that animal and that animal has been kept aside, then you could think of you know, Lacan, where you know, they are not allowed to show their aggression. So I would think of Lacaninum as a remedy also. So where the polarity, as we discussed, Mahesh Gandhi, you know, said a very, very interesting thing, that in Lacaninum the polarity is between sex and aggression, because this animal has sublimated a lot of its aggression to be part of human society. So we had a discussion whether we chose the wolf or the wolf chose us for particular reasons. I guess we chose the wolf, because if the wolf had a choice, the wolf would not choose to live with a human being. So that they have to constantly understand whether they are allowed to be aggressive, whether they are allowed. If they become aggressive, then they will be cast aside, they will be put aside, they'll be thrown out, they'll be um, shunned and despised. So they're not allowed. And you know, if they show aggression, then what do we do to a dog that shows aggression? You know, we say, does he need to be neutered? We do things to them if they show aggression. So you know, then the dog has no way of showing that. The horse has no way of showing that. Biting horses perhaps, you know, need, horses that bite perhaps need lacanine, I think. Or maybe if we could understand whether it's the sensitivity or abuse, or you know, what has been done, carcinosin as a beginning remedy, maybe it would
Thank you.
be
And
useful.
I think the precious metals like palladium, platinum,
Platina.
are combined with the ovarial cyst and aggression.
Yes. Maybe,
A
you know,
lot.
tightness of the muscles and tendons you would expect in platina and palladium, and hip issues you would expect, and tight forelocks and you know, things. Maybe the teeth you know, are not biting properly, and misalignment, and you know, gums, swollen gums or something like that in platinum, and you would expect. And constipation as an accessory symptom, again with both platinum, palladium, and plumbum.
Yeah.
So you would expect that to be there. Plumbum as well.
And think of the cycle plumbum, sulfur, and phosphor.
Hmm.
Another very tragic aspect of the Australian culture is the way that they treat their sports people, and particularly the sportsmen. So the sportsmen, the very popular game here involves a lot of physical aggression between the men playing the game, and they capture each other and wrestle each other and so on, and on a big field catching a ball. And as you're talking about it, I can see that we've got another type of encaged animal. There's these sports people. They're just exactly like it. and they have to, like the show Jumping Horse, they have to be able to jump beautifully to catch the ball, and to kick the ball beautifully, and to be able to capture the other men, and so on. And there's such a strong relationship with what you're talking about, and the brokenness of these individuals. It's just extraordinary. Very interesting to hear you talking.
Yeah, the fall from grace, as we say, with sulfur and palladium will have. Selenium also would probably have that, old beyond very early, or early senility, or early lack of usefulness, the old age, as we say, which comes in selenium. So, yeah.
And think of those tortured children who have to start playing the piano at age of 3. And have to learn in the kindergarten the second and third language already. Think of those.
Carcinosin as a remedy, because their desire to please is so strong that they are not asked, and then any sign of aggression is seen as, something that can be taught out of them, or, learnt out of them, or, cleaned out of them, or pushed out of them,
Clean.
cleaned out of them, send them to classes, send them do this. I have a neighbor who was so worried that her young son in grade 1 doesn't know 3-letter words, and she's going beside herself that he can't read yet. And how can in grade 1, less than 5 years, how can you expect the child to read? So, and with this online education also now, a lot of pressures there on mothers are constantly hovering around, behind the child. Is he answering? Tell him the answer, make sure he gives the right answer, wake him up, make him sit and make him focus. And it's a lot. It's too much. There's no learning happening. There's no
Or
learning happening.
think of the devices they now have in Japan and China, which they put on the head of the children to show whether the child is focused in the class or not.
It's absolutely like Falco Peregrinus.
Yeah,
It's
no
just,
choice.
forcing them to, no choice, absolutely no choice. And
Another,
you can't speak your truth again.
another group of people I have to think of is the question, what would be good for them, is the group of people who seem not to be capable to think logical anymore, who are not able to receive the informations which come through more and more every day, which are like in a tunnel. It is like this, I have to go. How can we help those?
So, camphor as a remedy, in any case, was something that was explored during this pandemic, because this information comes from outside. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of panic. You don't understand anything about it. You're beclouded. You're lost, and something happens, and you just collapse because you're not able to deal with that information. So the entire magnolia itself, you have Nux moschata, you have camphor, you have all the Loralis which are there, that group. You could have pulsatilla also, because just Berberidaceae, the Berberis family also, Podophyllums maybe, this entire, or lotus itself as a remedy, Nellumbo nucifera. So, but I would think of the first subclass, or when I mean the first subclass, that means the lotus is the Nymphaealis, you have the Magnoliaceae, the Myristicaceae, you have the Ranunculaceae, the Papaveraceae, you have all of those in the first subclass. These are the remedies that I would think, where clematis, for instance, something happens, and you're up, and you're doing things. And so, but mainly I would think of losing their way. If you speak of losing their way in, they can't go out, they get confused, they get disoriented. So I would think of the Loralis, the camphor, and the Nux moschata very much. Alumina is a remedy now, because alumina doesn't have any mind of its own. So head belongs to another. is one of the rubrics that we have. So alumina is there, carcinosin is there in head belongs to another. So you can think of these two, but alumina definitely camphor. I would think of these two, the spider remedies perhaps, maybe like. But in this particular situation, with this pandemic as a background, with information coming and you not being able to understand, I would think of camphor, Nux moschata, pulsatilla, and alumina as remedies.
And what
And
about
berberis.
lactobacillum to
Berberis.
make
We did
what?
see berberis, Priya, in
Mhm.
my cat
Berberis.
and even in my sister's husband.
Huh.
What about
So
lactel?
Berberis is not ready to stand up. Berberis is just not ready to stand up yet. So,
Mhm.
so when the time comes for you to stand up and be in the outside world is when Berberis has an issue and there are changeability of symptoms. And, you have all these things that come as a around that, and then all that pressure on the kidneys, and then you have these, because kidneys remove the water from the body, the information that comes in. So the vessel is not ready basically in Berberidaceae. So the entire subclass 1, all these remedies that have been put there by Mikhail Yakir have been put there very beautifully. So they all, in all of them, the vessel is not ready. So that is why aconite is also a first subclass remedy in Ranunculacea, because you understand that the information comes too much inside. You are not able to separate yourself from that information. You're not able to separate your shock, your fear, and your what's going to happen, and from that situation. So aconite itself has a remedy for the shock and the fear, I would think of.
Thank you.
They
What
all
about
come very, very,
lactel?
very close.
What about lactelfinum to have maybe a chance that life could be regained a little bit lighter than it is now?
Lac delphinum would again not be ready to be, because lac delphinum is now because it's a water remedy. Water is a womb, so it's given in a lot of, lac delphinum is prescribed in a lot of cases that have children that have autism. So because the inability to communicate is there, and so the main desire that the dolphin has is to communicate with the human, so that the closeness that they have. So phosphorus kind of individual who suddenly, because of this kind of situation, is unable to go out of the house perhaps,
Hey, get up.
and otherwise well
Hey.
communicating individual suddenly has gone into a shell. You might think of mollusk group of remedies also. So because anyway for them, anything new with disease, with hospitals, with anything that affects their security, their job, really aggravates them. So mollusk group of remedies, calcarea carp, cypria eglantina, conculinum, venus morcinaria, I would think of these remedies also, because we have to think of them when we think of the invertebrate group of remedies. So more than lac delphinum, I would think of a mollusk group of remedies, specifically calcarea carp, because although we think of it as a mineral remedy, it's not. It's the oyster, middle layer of the oyster, and we are now thinking of calcarea carp as an animal remedy. And
Oh, really?
cypria eglantina I have given. Yes, Cypria eglantina, which is the marine snail, the mollusk. I have given for this fear, these small symptoms which come, which get really blown out of proportion. You have your patients call. There is some sort of numbness, some sort of tingling, something is happening. I'm hearing stories about neighbors falling ill. These are the numbers. This is the fear I have. Somebody can come into my house and suddenly pick me up and put me in the hospital. These are the fears that a patient of mine had last week. So needed cypria eglantina, and she was previously on calcarea carb. So these are again, this is again one remedy which is very important. If you look at remedies similar to cypria eglantina, the Indian garden snail, the helix tosta, not the Indian garden snail, the garden snail, helix tosta, is also, where would be in this sort of situation, but would wake up at night and just eat and eat and eat and be more bulimic and put on weight. So is, and again be fearful of going out, fearful of injuries, fearful of something coming in, fearful of being in the hospital, all these news which is coming, would be extremely scared of going out, scared of interactions with somebody, a neighbor, probably without a mask, being in an elevator, getting that kind of symptoms. You can think of helix toaster also, because inside is safe and outside is very, very scary. So, but you have to be a little, go a little and come, go a little and come. So, Cypria eglantina and helix toaster, two more remedies, more than lac delphinum.
Lac delphinum is more about the communication system, not so much about the security issue. It's about the lack of communication.
Yes.
There is
I would
so much possibility, but it cannot be lived.
But it also has an aspect of lightness. And I was thinking to let the patient feel again the aspect of lightness could maybe help him as well.
But you see, even the Cypria eglantina, because it is a marine animal, this lightness is there because the larvae are released into the sea water where the buoyancy can be felt. So this lightness is a part of the mollusk language itself. So you'll have even murex saying that, you'll have even sepia saying that. But those are more like adult remedies, more outside, because we are talking about, sepia is more like a gastropod, so cephalopod, so it's more outside. But whereas this half in half out, still part retaining the shell or the home, making small forays outside into the world, and when something strange happens and fearful happens, coming back inside, is much more Cypria eglantina. And the lightness will come because once you take care of the small symptoms, the lightness is a part, the buoyancy is a part of the mollusk language also. Even Venus mercenaria will not understand what to do with this information, will get so scared, and there'll be a panic and not be able to go, because they like to be tied down to one place. They like to the muscles, mitillus edulis also, they like to be anchored to one spot. And now, with this kind of thing, suddenly if you have to go to the hospital, suddenly you have to go and meet someone, then they're not able to do. So then they get that social phobia and fear of going out and fear of diseases. So that entire group of remedies, the mollusks will be much more indicated than delphinum.
I think this is this kind of data overload for the instinctive center.
Yes.
Which they cannot cope with.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting, Neil?
Very interesting. Like I'm listening to all of this information that the three of you are sharing, as homeopaths. I'm not a homeopath. And it's just absolutely intriguing to me. And I am thinking about the children again. So we're now talking about children as they're growing up, 10, 11, 12, 13 sort of thing. And I'm not sure about in your countries, but in this country, very often the children are forced to go to play these competitive sports, and the mother and the father, and particularly the mothers, will go along and they will scream from the sideline at these children. And the screaming is about show some more violence, show some more cruelty, show some more domination, show some more ability to express power over the other players and to win, to be supreme. And these, some of these things that you're talking about, and the natural sort of remedy sort of aspects of them are so extreme in our culture, in this culture here. Not much fun for these children.
No, there's a direct line into symptoms and diseases and remedies that they need. It's a setup. And I was thinking of those boxers who box in cages, fighting for money. This is really a chicken thing. Despair, disaster, no way out, death could be immediate. So much pain.
I would also think of lac equinum there, because you know
Yeah.
that performance is the, you know, the muscles, the performance, the robustness of the performance, the, you know, testosterone driven sports like boxing that you're talking about. I presume the, you know, the boxing as a sport with so much money involved. I would think lac equinum, and maybe any of the big cats. You know, as we were watching this very nice documentary about Michael Jordan and
Mhm.
his rise to power, and how he, you know, he would literally fly, and how he would dominate any other opponent on the field, and at the top of his game, and you know, the training that he would do, the control over the mind that he would have, you know, literally like a big cat, you know,
Mhm.
the young big cat, you know. So really, you know, putting his thing out there, reaching in with the hand, and then just, you know, at the last minute getting that basket. So really a big cat remedy. So very, very nice. And in your case, Neil, I would probably think of, you know, carcinosin as a remedy for those children who have these really domineering parents, and they're, you know, shouting and, you know, forcing you to do things, and you know, you have no choice but to do what the mother says, the dominating mother says. So you have ailments from domination over many, many, many years, and you know, you're playing this sport where you have to perform every time, and you cannot show your own mind, or you cannot show fear. You have to overcome that fear, and that the nerves that you have, and be at the top of your game. So carcinosin is probably one of the remedies there. And yeah,
Yeah.
lac equinum is probably, and you know, panthera probably, as you know, in case of basketball, where you need that
Mhm.
speed, agility, and you need that maneuverability, and you need to have, really, you need to catch,
Hands.
and you need to, yeah, to do that immediately, and you have to literally come, and you know, the dunk is like that, so it's like a big cat. So I would think of a big cat
Volleyball
there.
too.
Yes,
Volleyball
in
too.
volleyball too, I would think of that. And even in, I presume you spoke about rugby, where these men have to show so much, you know, the Australian, this thing there again, I would think of a big cat, because you know, like cheetah perhaps, you know, short distances, real burst of speed you have to show, and you have to go, and there are probably larger opponents, but it's about you know, how fast and how quick and how you can get there, and aggressiveness that you have to show in a very short period. So
Cheetah
yeah, but
sounds good for that.
yeah, sounds, the big cats are good for where any speed, strength, and agility are required. And you know, perhaps even eagle as a, you know, could be thought of as a remedy, because again, you know, you have that being under domination of someone for a very long time, being unhappy in that your will and your desires are not asked for, your opinion is not asked for, and you have to perform, and you have to keep yourself aside, your happiness aside, uh, your choice aside, and you have to do this every time. So again, I would think of eagle also as a remedy, being at the top of the game. You know, you can't let anybody else come one above you, because rankings is a big thing in tennis. Rankings are a big thing in, you know, in these pugilistic events also. You know, single,
Mm.
small, and rankings are a huge thing. It's a game of rankings. Somebody can betray you, and you know, you have to throw a fight, and those things also happen, right? So again, you have betrayals, you have backstabbing, you have all of that also. It's part of the language of the game itself.
Do you agree that with carcinosinum a symptom is that there's a big love for animals and that people like to gather animals around them?
Yes,
Also be a
also with
little bit a sign that animals are able also to help.
Yes, also with Nufar luteum, because again, Nufar luteum is the lotus we spoke about. Again, there, you know, there they feel the pain of that animal. You know, they get those sick animals. They feel the pain of those animals. They are animal rights activists. They speak about, you know, they say you can't do this to an animal, and you know, they go, they rescue these animals. They cry for them literally, and they're just lost in the that is the cause of their life, you know. So, and in carcinosin you have much more of a domination and those other aspects of coming. But Nufar luteum is just about those activists who really identify so strongly with. They are vegans, they go rescue these animals, they keep them in their home, they build shelters for them. They are their life's purpose is about that. So, and otherwise they're lost in that purpose. So I would think of Nufar luteum also as a remedy.
And they are lost in the suffering.
Indeed, sorry.
And they are lost in the suffering.
Yes, the suffering affects them very strongly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the things that we talked about there earlier were about the suffering of the animals and the suffering of the humans, connected to the suffering of the animals and so on. And particularly when we talked about the factory farming and those types of experiences, and we broadened out the conversation to look at the suffering, for example, of a child at the hands of the mother on the sports field, those sorts of things. So we expand that out. And what you're just talking about there at the moment is an aspect of the suffering of the human when they perceive the suffering of animals. And I've seen this with, or other humans. So I've seen this with activists. So, for example, an activist who is working with the suffering of children. So in this country at the moment, there's a large awareness of pedophilia, where the children are predated upon. And the impact of the entwinement or the engagement of the suffering of these children to the suffering of the observer is extreme. Like it's an extreme entanglement with the suffering. And so if we think about it, like from a Buddhist perspective, as an example, like as a spiritual approach, we would say that it's an attachment and an identification. So, the attachment is the attachment to the suffering of the children. And the identification is that they could see themselves actually in the situation of being one of these children themselves, and brings back all the traumatic memories, perhaps epigenetic, past lives, so on, so on, so on. So like there's a lot of ways in which that can all be connected. But that business of the attachment to the suffering of another person and for it to be connected to your own suffering is extreme. The other thing which is interesting with these activists, like people who are drawn to become activists in that way, and I think particularly of vegans, and I have never met a group of people who are so violent as vegans. Vegans are the most violent people I've ever come across. And it's because of this attachment to the suffering and the identification with the suffering of the animals. So like I'm no apologist for factory farming and how, like I'm definitely not an apologist for these things. But I can certainly see this other layer, which is the attachment to the suffering. So I'm just interested, Priya, like your observations in there around all of those topics. So like, what are you seeing in there?
Interesting question. I need to gather my thoughts. I agree. Extremely identifying with something and being unable to separate, but being and taking their suffering as your own would probably be something like carcinosin, would be a bird remedy also actually. So because you feel someone's pain so much that you identify with it so much that you're entangled, as you said, and you're not able to let go of that entanglement, would be like a bird remedy, like buteo, like falco, perhaps, because of course, as a top predator, the bird understands what is being done to it on some level and also sees, of course, but it's very complex, isn't it? The relationship between the bird, the disciplined bird, and its owner, or the say in this mother and child who's a sports person. It's a very entangled relationship. So it's kind of it would take a very strong external event for the person to understand the depth of what they have been subjected to, as that sports person child, or this activist. They get enmeshed in that, so they're not able to extricate themselves. So I would think again of bird remedies or carcinosin. where you identify so strongly that you're not, whereas a nufar luteum would not be able to affect violence on someone, because they don't have that capacity. The vessel is not strong enough to inflict something on someone, whereas a bird remedy would be able to, some pushed too much, they would be able to, and pushed too hard, when the anger comes up with the resentment and the anger, you could also think of ammoniacums as a remedy group, or where this did I not matter so much, did I not exist for you, an ammoniacum would ask. So an ammoniacum mure would be very resentful, very hurt and very resentful, and would be very bitter, and maybe nitric acid also there, again carcinosin, and also the crustaceans, where be it crab or lobster, because they are not the anger, they're mollusks, but they're in the water and on land, trying to be in two places. They're in the muriaticum element, which is the sea water. So muriaticum again is the theme for resentment, the where you see resentment, you generally think of muriaticums. So I would think of crabs also as a crustaceans also as, and extreme resentment, extreme anger, you could think even of Scorpio as a remedy, where the so much has been done to them, so much brutality has been done to them, that they become numb, and and when they're extremely aggressive in their outburst, and again, uh, because they become benumbed with pain, and then they lash out in an equivalent sense. So again, Scorpio, crustacean, the bird remedies, carcinosin. These are the four groups which you would see where the resentment is strong. You would probably think of resentment and anger is very strong. Crustaceans as remedies, Scorpio as a remedy, and where the resentment is not there, but and again this bitterness which is there, ammonium mure, and so these are the group of remedies that I would think of. Depends on the symptoms what comes up.
Me,
So I
Max,
see we have different kind of cages in reality. We have a spiritual cage, which can be a religion. We have a mental cage, which can be a delusion or a force exaggerated by a parent or an animal caretaker. We have an emotional cage with the suffering. We have a body cage with the illness. Very interesting. Never realized that there are so many cages.
Yeah.
and we
And we
end
have
up,
the
I
system
think,
cages, the system, the herd system, the family systems, a lot of cages in place.
Yes.
the question of Neil makes me strongly think of the miasmatic thinking in homeopathy, because they hang on to the suffering from maybe out of another life and all the time in an epigenic way. I would,
Yes.
as a homeopath, I would say we must look at it in a miasmatic way. And besides, from my knowledge in the systemic work, I would say we should maybe have a look at this in a systemic way, to find what they are hanging on, and to try to solve it from the end and not from the presence.
Yes.
From the beginning, not from the end, from the beginning, and not from the end state.
From the root.
From the root, yes, thank you. Yeah.
So when we are going for the root, my dear colleagues, why do we create cages?
The desire to acquire is I think this greed and the acquisitiveness and desire to possess. These are basic human qualities. The desire to accumulate, perhaps, make something your own, which is you it's something that you have decided in your mind and you want that. So you don't think of whether what is on the other side, whether that creature wants, or you don't think. It's perhaps a very infantile desire to possess. You want immediate gratification, we're not used to waiting for things anymore. Because we can
So,
possess whatever we want, whenever we want, we can buy it.
so you think that the major cause for creating cages is greed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Neil, what would you think? What is the major root cause of creating cages?
Well, there's a number of major root causes, but power and dominance would be also very important. So the need to dominate and to have power over another would be another, aspect of it, and then the experience of that. But greed would have to sit in there as a motivation. Would have to every time.
So we have dominance, power, and greed. Bettina, what would you think?
Immediate gratification.
Maybe when I think about it as creatively, I would maybe say we create what is in us. We create the cages again. The cages, as you said, Marianne, are so many, which we bear in us.
So you would say if we want to drop cages, we have to work on power, greed, and dominance in ourselves.
Yes.
And we have to be able to cope with our desire for instant gratification.
Yes.
So getting rid of cages, as we see, is a spiritual cause.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual way.
Neil smiles.
So anybody
Absolutely.
who wants to free animals can now work on power, greed, and dominance in himself and on the desire of instant gratification.
In that way, like with what you're talking about, I would see the suffering of the activist. So I like in my own practice, I would never do this in this way that we're talking about, but I could classify activists as having so much similar disease. The diseases of the activist are so similar. And, to get away from that attachment to the suffering of the object of the engagement, it's inevitable that they have to go back and look at the engagement of themselves every time. It's always the case. Yeah.
Any change has to begin from the individual, and then it can be translated into change that, will cascade into the group, family group, the society, at large, and probably the country and so on and so forth. Without that, it cannot. The toughest job would have to be, working on yourself. Because last time after we spoke, I tried to, give up eggs for a month. I did. But, sometimes you just feel like having eggs. So you have to wait that 10 minutes and think about it. And it's tough. It's tough because you don't see the process. You just see the.
It's so nice that you're saying that, Priya, because since our first talk, I never ate an egg.
Oh.
This is so we kicked ourselves
Uncanny.
in a way in our talk. It's very interesting to me.
It's so uncanny, So I tried it for a month. I didn't have, and then, so it's really, you have to work very hard on yourself for a simple thing like giving up an egg. So can you imagine other things where there is no pain that you can see? Where pleasurable experiences are there, like, maybe acquiring a dog who's not meant for Mumbai is a pleasurable experience. Can you imagine that? Then you can't really see the pain. So how will you identify the pain? And then how will you understand what you're doing and how to break free if you cannot identify that?
Mm.
It's a status symbol to have a Samoyed or a husky in Mumbai these days. Can you imagine the poor husky?
Yeah.
About the eggs, I would have an example again about the awareness of animals. We have quite few chickens, and when they want to bring up not puppies, little chickens, they lay the eggs in a place we do not find them, or not, maybe we see it, but it's not the ordinary place. And when they don't want to bring up little ones, they lay it there where we usually look and where we take them fast. They are aware whether the eggs are for them or whether they let them go. They don't hang on them.
Interesting.
I agree. So this is probably how we started, but now the consumption has far outstripped the productive capacities of few chicks or a chicken.
Of course.
So, you know, now it has become industrial with all its attendant global warming.
No question, I
and this
wouldn't
and
eat
that,
industrial eggs. No, no.
Yeah. So, yeah.
This has
Absolutely.
been a very uplifting talk today.
It has.
May I ask for your closing words, everybody? Who wants to start?
Neil, please. He
Neil,
began.
please.
Well, thank you, Priya. I just have felt so blessed to actually hear, you know, what you've all had to say here today. It's been remarkably useful. And, you know, as I'm working sort of so strongly at the moment with these collaborative models between humans and animals of different kinds, it's really interesting to hear, you know, what everybody's talking about. And I can see that this major focus has to be around the engagement of the human. So the way in which the human is engaged themselves with their attachments, their identifications, and so on. And the freeing of that then actually allows the opportunity of a different relationship with the animals that are around us. So that's the thing that I'm taking away from this interview, is that the route forward is to actually understand our own engagement and to make steps around that. And then from that, the opportunity springs, you know, to change the relationship that we've got with the animals around us. So thank you.
Well, I follow Neil because that's exactly what I get out of our talk as well. And I just would like to add a thought to the people who listen to us. At the end of the 19th century, there was still the opinion that Black people were more a sort of animal than humans. That the churches and all through it, that is documented. And I would say we've been at a stage where we did things like this, and maybe everybody should reflect a little bit what animals are in relationship to humans. To give up this, they are here that I can use, eat, abuse, and so on. But also those who are further, who are treating them with love and like their children, maybe also these people should think about it. Do I give the room to the animals I am responsible for, that they can live their life as much as possible, and to build their own kingdom around me? That would be my wish to our audience.
Yeah.
I really think this has been a very thought-provoking conversation. And Bettina, I really this natural, organic way of letting the animal build its kingdom within your kingdom is such a giving way, is such a giving relationship with another creature, rather than a taking relationship with you know, that one has with humans have with themselves and with the animals that you know, they seek to interact with. So I also want to, you know, re-examine the place of certain constructs that we have. You know, we buy things very easily, we consume things more. uh, I'm trying to you know, reduce the duration and the time of my meals buy a little bit more, just see, what is required. We're eating more as a people, so that puts stress on the system to produce more, and then we buy more and we consume more, and that's a cycle, never ending cycle. And re-examine our relationship with the animals around us, as you're saying. And it's such a beautiful relationship to allow a pig to make a kingdom within your kingdom. That is the image that I will take back with me. And I can hear the chickens behind you, they're crowing, and it's a very natural sound. And we wake up, where I am in Mumbai, we wake up to the sound of birds chirping, and owls hooting, and squirrels. And I saw my first monsoon snail 2 days ago, the big apple snail. I was so happy, and I was talking to to the snail and picking it up and putting it aside. And I generally do that. So um, those are beginnings. I think this conversation is a good beginning, and I think we have to have another conversation where, when we are in the middle of our process, where we've examined our relationship with the animals around us a little bit more, and come back and have another conversation and have a way forward, and try and see what our limitations are, and try and overcome them, because you all are, doing far more spiritual work. I know Marianne is doing a lot of work that is for the future. So because this is the way, because we are losing species at an alarming rate, and we are not thinking about things like where we are going, what legacy we are leaving for our children. I wonder whether children are going to see rhinoceroses and giraffes, and even real animals like that. It
Even
just,
tigers get very rare nowadays.
yes. And snakes. I saw a cobra in my compound a month ago, just sunning itself, just there sunning itself, and very gracefully made a retreat when I was walking, which was very unexpected. So they are not by nature aggressive. We are at the top of the food chain. It is our responsibility to make sure that we are better, and we think the right way, and then it's going to trickle down, because we can't take so much of their space and make our kingdom and not think about them, and worry about things that and not do things. We have to really look within ourselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm living here in on a property which I share with poisonous vipers, poisonous centipedes, and poisonous scorpions, and the cats, and the olive trees, and all the other insects and cicadas. And we live peacefully together. And
Mm.
first, I was very afraid of the snakes. But now, when I'm going to the compost, I see them, I hear them. They retreat when I go there. When I go back, they come back. It's very nice to see. And a viper told me that all is no problem if we respect the territories of each other, and that she
Yes.
knows that a territory is a floating thing in time and space. So she doesn't go to a place where a cat goes the same time. She just takes another time, goes the same space. So she is in her territory, and the cat is in its territory, and the territory are on the same property. It is possible. We can share. It's
Absolutely, we
kind of
have
a
to
reality.
share. We have to share. We are far too many human beings on this planet, and far too unthinking about the place and the role of, other creatures that we share this earth with.
So my last word is about that it is time to learn from animals and to talk to them.
Mm.
And that communication is one of the tools to drop the cages.
A lot to think about.
Yeah. So I would say let's meet again in January and see what comes from this talk.
Sure.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Okay. My dear friends and colleagues, thank you very much for this talk. Meet you again.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Marianne.
much. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Neil.
Bye. Bye, Bettina. Bye.
Bye.
Neil.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.